Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like Diamonds, back again. Got some exciting news. Probably saw the title of this announcing brand new, your new Salt Strong fishing coach. We got a lot of requests for a certain area or areas. This is not just one state. This gentleman really is going to cover, I don't know, I can't even count quite a few states because he's been used to traveling. That's what he's always done. And we'll talk about those states here in a little bit. But I think the coolest part about this guy is he has been a Salt Strong, I'm going to call him like a disciple for many, many, many years. We've watched him grow personally as an angler, and he even started his own YouTube channel and has his own podcast, which we're going to start integrating into ours as well. And he's been able to attract a lot of really skilled anglers, and in some cases, some pretty big names in his area to come on his podcast and share stuff. And it's an area that we haven't given enough focus to, but it's certainly a fast growing area. And the beauty of it is, because you even did one course that I watched on catching flounder in particular, and it applies down here in Florida and Texas, and even in areas where we're going to talk about here in a little bit, in North Carolina, Virginia, and New Jersey, New York. I mean, it's really wild how many similarities there are. But then again, I get it. We're anglers. We want someone who's going to talk about our specific area. And so that's a big reason that we're doing this. So welcome to the family, to the show. Rich Natoli, what's up, brother?
It's awesome to be here. I love welcome to the family. It's been a long time that I've been a disciple within Salt Strong, and this is great. I've been looking forward to something like this for quite a while.
Yeah, Rich has basically applied to every single job that we've ever
Yeah,
had.
pretty
And
much.
and I knew where you're, because I've watched you. I've watched you do these videos. You've done a couple, even inside the Insider Club, you've done a couple different videos for our members, and they all get excellent feedback. I was like, no, dude, you don't want to be doing this desk job. Like, you want to be out there in the water filming. You're great in front of the camera. You got an amazing radio voice as well. And I was like, man, you need to be in front of the camera teaching this stuff. Just it's tough to find anglers who, one, are consistent in catching fish, and then two, that can talk about it and teach it, right? It's a whole different ball game. I mean, it's the same reason that Tiger Woods has a coach that wasn't necessarily ever in the top 10 in the world. I mean, Tiger Woods is probably not the best coach because so many things just come easy to him, and it's tough for him to get it out and just to tell people, like, very, very simply how to do something. And I've watched you just absolutely just destroy it in that area where, the teaching part of it, it's a special gift. So I'm really, really pumped. Let's talk about the states, because I'm sure everyone's kind
Sure.
of curious. Would you say like North Carolina, New York, higher? Because that's kind of all the areas you fish.
Yeah, so I'm normally going to be out in the New Jersey, New York, Delaware, Maryland area. So the upper Chesapeake is, I would consider, normal. Delaware along the coast, all of New Jersey, the entire coastline, the Delaware Bay up through the Raritan, New York, absolutely. And I'm looking to expand up into Connecticut, Rhode Island, and get up there this upcoming year, this upcoming season. So I cover a long range, and I do also make at least one trip to North Carolina every year. And I like fishing Pamlico Sound down there. So, you have to get the reds and the specks in on the list of fish that you catch every year. So I enjoy going down there and heading out into the flats and into Pamlico Sound.
I love it. That's where you met Wyatt, right? Around there.
I Yes, I met Wyatt. He met me at Oregon Inlet, and we went out for the day. And he got the slam, and I fell a red short. But yeah, it was great meeting Wyatt and getting out on the water with him. It was awesome.
That's so cool. And that's going to be, one of our goals as we continue to expand and add coaches like Rich, is to find people who do move around, right? And even Pat, that was a big reason we brought Pat Ogletree on. The guy lives out of an RV, and if you haven't followed Pat, you should. He's doing insider reports. So he's going and fishing brand new spots every single week. He started in Texas. He went from Texas all the way down to Florida, now then went all the way up to Virginia, and now moving back down. I believe he's in South Carolina right now. And every week he's literally fishing new spot, filming the whole thing, and that's only for our private insider club. So if you're an insider member, make sure to follow Pat. Really, really cool. So Rich, tell us about the background and this fat dad thing, because
Right.
that's a name that some people are already familiar with. Some that we might hear it here in the future as you start doing more and more stuff with us. Where did that come from?
Sure. So my background in fishing, I was one of those rare people that didn't start in the farm pond catching sunnies and bluegills. I actually started in saltwater fishing for small bluefish and flounder. And I was hooked immediately. And part of it, to be honest, was the fact that my grandfather had a boat and I loved being on the boat. So I was that kid that would, I'd be on the water every single moment I could, anytime the adults would allow me. And I knew that if I just went to my grandfather before my dad, I was allowed on the boat because he overruled my dad. So I did that
And
quite
so
often.
what area was this where your
This
grandfather
was
had the
New
boat?
Jersey.
Okay, got
Yeah,
it.
this
Cool.
it was South New Jersey, out of Stone Harbor, Hereford Inlet, and we did a lot of the bluefish offshore was the big thing. And we're talking the 20 pounders plus offshore, and we go, anywhere up to 20 miles offshore for those. A lot of flounder. At that time, the Delaware Bay was a great area to go. It's pretty much a dead fishery right now, but it used to be just filled with fluke or flounder, and we would do that. And I just fished that way my whole life. And then we got kayaks, and I started going out on the kayak. I got my own boat, and I found that I really liked the kayak fishing. So I had this old paddle kayak that I was fishing from. I had the boat. I did a lot of inshore. It was a 19-foot skiff, and I decided no more boat. I'm just going kayak, and now I'm fishing primarily. I go out on boats with buddies, and I'll go on party boats and charters, but primarily I'm fishing inshore and near shore in a kayak, and I have a pedal kayak now, so I can handle it.
Yeah, much. It's a game changer, right?
It is, when you go out, and I didn't think I needed one, because I went 20 plus years using a paddle and I got pretty good at it. But man, when you can just pedal slowly and stay in one spot in a 4 knot current, it's nice.
And
You don't
when
you don't
finding a fish and trying to get away from structure and all that is a game changer, especially if there's wind out there. It's a game changer.
Yes, yes, get it. Yeah, I mean, I can now fish in tight to jetties. You can fish in tight to bridges, which are pretty dangerous when you don't have that pedal. I mean, they're not the safest of places when you have boats flying through, but
Yeah,
you can at least position yourself in a safe area, and you can get on the fish, and it's a relatively easy proposition when you're in a kayak.
it's awesome. So you've been fishing a big chunk of your life. You got good enough somehow, miraculously. How did that happen? Where all of a sudden you say, "Hey, I want to start teaching this stuff." How did that occur?
Well, I think it happened. I'd never thought about teaching it. And I actually spent most of my adult life fishing by myself. I would go at night when the kids were growing up, so I wouldn't miss time with them at the beach. And I would just fish overnight. And I just kept doing that. And then actually, it was Salt Strong. So I listened to this crazy guy, Joe, on a podcast. And I was like, what is this guy talking about? And I was like, I kept thinking, well, I can do this stuff. How cool would it be to help other people to get on to fish? So I wanted to kind of start building a resume for something like Salt Strong, and I said, well, I'll do a YouTube channel. So I started Fat Dad Fishing,
Yeah,
and it's all about helping people to catch more fish and basically have a better on the water experience. A lot of the people are weekend warriors, and the people that are locals, they always say, just put your time in, put your time in. Well, it's not just about putting time in. You have to put the right time in at the right places. And I think education can really cut down the time that you need to be productive while you're out there.
it's huge. I mean, I use that golf analogy, right? It To become a great golfer, it's not just going to a driving range and hitting. At some point, you need a coach, right, to teach you the right mechanics. Otherwise, you're just practicing crappy swings that then a real
Right.
coach has to come and actually undo to say, all right, you've been doing this wrong the entire time. I think that's so important. Now, I'm curious, the fat dad, just dad bod, is that what it?
Yeah. Well, I think everybody kind of has their thing as to, what bothers them. And for me, it was my weight. And, I'm not huge, huge. But I would consider myself fat, and I'm doing better now. But I just thought it was a funny name, and it's funny how many people identified with it and said, "Well, I can be in your group. I gotta watch because I'm a fat dad." Or we have a bunch of people that say, "Well, I'm not fat, but I'm your fat mom." So they come in, the fat dads and fat moms. So it's just a little something funny. You
Uh,
got to make fun of yourself every once in a while.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So you're, at least from what I've watched you do, and you've done, like I said, a few videos with us in the Insider Club already. You've talked about sheepshead, obviously a ton of flounder and some
Right.
stripers, bluefish. Is that kind of the main species that we're going to be talking about, or you're going to be talking about in the Insider Club?
Yeah, I think we have similar species. We have reds that do visit New Jersey. We're not quite sure if they're here all the time. We have some speckled trout, but really it's weakfish up here. So weakfish is definitely something that I look at. Striped bass is huge, and that's a huge part of the year. Flounder, also called fluke for many of the Mid Atlantic and Northeast, those are probably the most popular. But then we have things like blackfish, so tautog, which is a very big winter fishery, and sheepshead is an emerging fishery, or I should say, a re-emerging fishery. So it covers all of those, and then of course we had the bluefish in there. The one issue that we have though is the weak fish population has been so decimated that you can still go out and target them and you can come back with nice fish, but they're so decimated it's almost like you don't want to catch them. A
Mhm.
lot of people don't want to catch them because every one that's saved is just going to help that population to grow again. So I don't do a lot of weak fish, although I will catch them from time to time as a catch and release fish.
Have they not put any stringent limits to try to improve the fishery, or no?
They have. So it's one fish at 13 inches.
Okay.
And that's pretty much, every state that I'm aware of is at that. And the big thing is it's not overfishing from humans. It is being attributed to the rise in the population of the dolphins and porpoises and the spiny dogfish, which has just absolutely decimated them. And eh, so they're there. We're seeing some nicer sizes. The recruitment for the species has increased for the first time in many years over the past couple of years. So maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and maybe we can put those back on the list of things that are becoming a primary target for us.
Cool. I know the main objective was just to introduce you so everyone's used to seeing you and hearing you. Let's talk about some tips though. I love talking about mistakes, right? Because I
Right.
love learning from mistakes. What were some mistakes that maybe you made and that you see other, not just new anglers, but any anglers that are making when it comes to saltwater fishing? And you could
Right.
use whatever you want, if it's certain states or if it's kayak only. But I'd love to hear any mistakes that we can learn from.
Yeah, so I have a few. Most of these I've been guilty of as well. The first one that I want to talk about is when you're out there fishing, make sure you're fishing for the fish and you're not fishing for the people that are out on the water with you. And that just basically means don't look for the other boats necessarily, but look for where the fish are going to be within that area. And up here in the mid Atlantic, what you typically have is a lot of vertical jigging, whether it's for weak fish or bluefish or fluke. People are vertical jigging. So what they're doing is setting up a drift in their boat. And most often, they're setting up a drift that's going to be very convenient for them. So they're finding the longest channel where they can just go to the top, they can turn off the engine, and they can just drift for, a mile, 2 miles, and they just drift this dead center of a channel. And people see them out there and they just set up next to them. So you just have this parade of boats just drifting down and then driving back up. But what they're not actually doing is looking at the structure of the water or underneath the water, and they're not understanding where the fish actually want to be. And oftentimes, what you see out there is they may be in the channel, but they're only about 20 yards away from where the fish actually are. So they think they're in the right spot. They see the other boats, which kind of validate that they might be in the right spot, but they're off by 20 yards. And 20 yards makes all the difference. If the fish are not going to move 20 yards to have something bouncing down the middle of a dead flat channel where there's no cover, there's no way to hide, there's no way to ambush anything, they're going to be in the structure that's 10, 20, 30 yards away. So I think that's a big thing. Understand what you're drifting over, understand the fish and what type of structures they like, and fish the structure. Don't fish where everybody else is.
So
That
I assume you've had a scenario like that where you see a bunch of boats drifting all together, copying each other, and you're 20 yards away waving while you're pulling up fish.
I do. As a matter of fact, I have a video that I did. Maybe it was last year or the year before, where I'm talking as I'm pedaling my kayak up to a spot, and I'm saying, "See, they're not in the right spot. They're over too far." There's a guy in a pontoon boat, and I say, "See, he's pulling something up, but it's little." And then I drop the line and I pull up a 25, 26-inch fluke right there. And I was like, it's because they're where they are, it's a flat 40 feet deep. Where I was, it went from 7 feet down to 40 feet, and I was fishing that ledge, and that's where I caught the fish. And it was funny because the people came over and like, why did I not get any good fish? And I said, because you got to move over. Just get in line with where I was, look at your depth finder and fish that. And they started doing it. I moved out of their way so that they could fish it. I had my fish.
Fishing the ledge. I love it.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
That's a good one. And we're guilty as just humans, right? We're social animals, and there's been so many studies where you see someone doing this even in line. Like you could have two lines. They've done studies on it where let's just say it's two windows, like a bank window, and one has zero people in front of it, even though there's a person standing there like they're ready, and the other line has 150. It's almost like you don't want to look like a fool and go walk past the 150 people to maybe feel
Right.
like an idiot, and they turn you around and you have to walk down with the shame, and
Right.
people will continue to keep piling in that line and not use their head to say, hey, maybe this lane is actually open. It's wild how and then finally someone will be bold enough to do it, and then everyone follows, and now the lines are even. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating studies on just psychology of people. So that's a great one in terms of studying the fish and obviously maximizing your structure. What are some other ones, other mistakes that you've done or you see people continue to do?
Sure. And I've done the first one that I already mentioned. I've absolutely, and I've done it in tournaments too, which was I don't know. You just want to be with the guys, right? And you're no one's catching fish together. So
Yeah,
I've done it too. The next one is two. Two is one and one is none. And it really goes into the planning and redundancy and really understanding what your day on the water is going to be. This is a big thing with Salt Strong, and I can't stress it enough. If you're going to hit the water and you're going to take that time out of your day and make that investment, you owe it to yourself to do a little bit of planning ahead of
mm,
time to understand that if I go to spot A and it doesn't turn out, I better be prepared with B, C, D, and E. And I actually go further than that. But normal people can probably just do a few spots at a few locations, and it saves you a lot of time. If you're in a boat, yes, you can just pick up and you can run and gun to the next spot. But if you spend 20 minutes trying to figure out what it is, it's a waste of your time on the water. So go out there, be prepared for what you might find out there. Just because you think this one spot is going to be productive doesn't mean it is. But if you have in your mind and in your plan, if A doesn't work, I'm going to B. And if B doesn't work, I'm going to go and I'm going to go to C. It just makes it an easier day. You have a plan. You always feel like renewed when you go to that new spot. It becomes, well, this is just the next step in the plan. Your confidence stays up. Otherwise, it's just, well, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to try here. It probably won't work. So I
so
think
true.
being prepared, being confident in your spots and your plan is always important. And you really shouldn't hit the water without multiple backup plans, uh, just so that you make sure that you get the best experience that you can when you're on the water.
I love the fact you mentioned the confidence because it's 100% true. And there's been many times we go out there with no plan. We just have one little area picked out, and if it's a bust, then all of a sudden we're like, oh, we're Luke and I are both on our phones, just like we're basically guessing. We don't have that much confidence when we have a plan and we've done the work the day before. The next spot we're going to almost even more excited. We're like, all right, that first, it's wild how much of a difference that makes when you have a plan. What do you use? I know we got the smart fishing spots for the insider members. What different pieces do you use when you're doing your pre-trip planning? Like how do you determine if, hey, this is going to be a spot I'm going to fish or not?
Yeah, I do. I use that. That's what I use, the smart fishing spots, and I'll use the different layers. I like to look at the depth changes. I will look also at the shading so that you can see, where the contours are. And I'm really looking at a couple of things. I'm looking at wind directions and speeds. I'm looking at where the current is going to be flowing on each tide cycle and where it's going to hit the structure and create current seams. Uh, it's not always fish the most current. It's often up here fish the seam next to the strong current. So
That's
there's a little
good.
bit of relief for the predators. The small bait fish duck out of that main current when they can, and the predators are sitting right there. So I'm usually looking for things like that. And then when I'm on the water, I'm verifying it. So you can see a current seam. It's not difficult to see those. And that's what I'm fishing. So if I see a nice eddy off of some structure, especially if there's a creek mouth or multiple bodies of water converging at one point and there's a nice seam, that's the type of thing that I'm looking for. But I'm using smart fishing spots for that.
Cool. Love it. All right. What else? What are some other mistakes?
I think you need to don't do what I used to do. I used to fish by myself all the time, and I didn't talk to anybody about what I was doing. You need to network, you need to understand what's working at any given time. I can tell you, generally speaking, as an example, when it comes late July, early August in New Jersey, you want to fish for flounder down at about 30 feet, generally speaking. Not this year. Now, if I had stuck to that because I didn't talk to anybody and I just fished 30 feet, I was going to have a very difficult summer this past year. The trends were they weren't there. They were in the 15 to 20 range. They were at the drops from 7 down to 20, and you had to fish creek mouths for certain days of the year. And so you can't just rely on the general information. You have to look and see what's happening. Do you fish the wind blown or the wind protected side of a salt marsh when you're going for striped bass? it it changes every single week. So the more people that the more information you can get, the better you can do when you're out on the water, and the less alternate spots you're going to have to hit, because you already know this worked yesterday, it's worked the past 4 days, it should work for me. Different spot, but the same description of the spot, the same characteristics. I should be successful right here.
And that's the power of the Salt Strong, the insider community, that online community. Is there's new fishing posts going up every 5-10 minutes, and a lot of the members are leaving really detailed
Yes.
reports, and I've benefited from it, just reading when people say, oh man, I didn't even think about that. I'm going fishing this weekend on the east coast of Florida, and guess what I did? I go into the community to see what's going on, because that's not my I haven't fished there in well over 2 months now. We're more on the west coast normally, so I'm going over there, and I literally use smart fishing spots, and I use the community. I network with people. I know Luke's told this story quite a few times when he was in that tournament series. They were getting their butts kicked in the beginning by all these full-time guides who had their own network, and the kind of the non-guides were getting just destroyed. And so the non-guides, the weekend warriors who were good enough to enter tournaments but just not good enough to win, they said, well, hey, we know they're all talking together. They're not showing spots, but they're talking about trends, right? This is not about
Right.
sharing a GPS spot. This is about sharing trends, to your point. And they got together and started doing that, and guess what? They started winning. And before you know it, they were like sharing so much information and helping each other out. One of them was always a number 1 or 2 spot. And it was really, really cool testimony to the power of a network. And all the pros do it. If you want to win
Right.
a tournament, and regardless if you're talking about saltwater or fresh, you better have a network to know what's going on in that lake or that body of water. It's absolutely critical.
Yeah, it's all about narrowing down that, the 90-10 that you talk
That's it.
about. It,
That's it.
it's all about narrowing it down, and you may be able to get to a 70-30 just based on understanding of the species and your thoughts. But what's going to get you from that 30 down to the 10? And that's the trends. The trends are really going to get you to hone in, and it's going to save you a ton of time, and you're going to have a lot more productivity when you're out there. So I just really believe in that. Look for, the other people as resources and be open to what they're doing and give it a try.
Let's you mentioned the different species, and there are a lot in that range, right? I mean, you start talking North Carolina and Maryland, Virginia, you got redfish, you have all this stuff. Then you start getting in all the different species up in New Jersey and even up in Connecticut. Talk about that, about the importance of understanding the species. I think so many anglers, and you'll talk to them sometimes, at the ramp or a marina or somewhere, especially some of these guys fishing off a pier. Like, what are you going for? Anything that'll bite.
Right.
You might want to go after something a little bit different. Like maybe like target something. Like I'm going to have a specific bait, specific rig for a specific species. Now I might catch something by randomly or bycatch, but I usually go in with some kind of plan. So talk about the importance of targeting species specific.
Yeah, it's critical. I mean, if you want to go out there and you want to have success, you can do the just throw it over and hope you catch something approach. And you may catch multiple species, you may catch something, but you really need to hone in on the best spot for a specific target. So for example, up here you can vertical jig for a fluke and you can catch weak fish in the same spots, but not all of the same spots. They're both ambush predators. They're both going to look for similar types of areas, but you're not necessarily going to have the weak fish in the same areas. And they're certainly not going to necessarily be in the same area of the water column. So, you go out there and you're bouncing just for fluke and it's not a great fluke spot. You're not going to get the weak fish that are there either. You're probably not going to get the bluefish. You're probably just going to get a whole bunch of sea robins and a whole bunch of oyster toadfish and things like that, things that you really don't want. So, you have to understand the fish that you're targeting. And there's really no fish that will bite on anything. Maybe a bluefish, maybe,
Yeah.
but you still have to find it in the water column, and it's not necessarily. And they still do go to certain spots in certain places. They're not necessarily going to be sitting in the same spot that you're fishing for a fluke. So I think understand the fish, understand the species, understand what they're looking for, understand where the bait are going to be, what the conditions, the currents, and the winds are doing to manipulate that bait. And that's where you want to, tie it all together. And you say, well, this is actually a weak fish spot today, or this is a fluke spot today, or this flat right here, bluefish all day. I got bluefish all day over here if I want to do it. But I think a lot of people overcomplicate and sometimes oversimplify fishing. They think if I just go out and I toss the slam shady, I'm going to catch something. Well, not necessarily. It's not necessarily true. You can have a great bait on there, but if it's not
It's
the
not
bait that they're looking,
magical. It's you still got to be in a
no,
good spot. Yeah.
you have to be in a good spot and you have to understand what you're going for. Up here right now, the false albacores are a big thing right up on the beach.
That's cool.
Well, so they're there, but you can't necessarily catch them if you're out there fishing for fluke. You can't catch them if you're out there necessarily fishing for striped bass because you need a different bait, you need a different presentation. You got to rip that thing through the water as fast as you can, and it's a whole different thing. So if you're going out there without a target, again, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're just not setting yourself up for success. You may catch a fish, but you're not going to catch a lot of fish, and you might not be happy with the quality of the fish that you get.
Yep. Yeah. Speaking of the quality on junk fish, what's worse, sea robin, toadfish, or catfish?
So we don't get a lot of saltwater catfish up here. It's pretty
But you
rare.
know what they are, and you've
Oh
caught them.
yeah, yeah. I actually caught my first one ever up here. It was just in the salt, just outside of the brackish. I honestly think the oyster toadfish is the worst. They are disgusting. They've got those nasty jaws, all slimy. Yeah, I do not like them. Sea robins, at least they're good bait and they do taste good. So if you want to keep them, you can keep them. But yeah, I'm gonna vote for the oyster toadfish.
That's pretty
Absolute
funny.
worst.
That's pretty
Yeah.
funny. Any other mistakes that you can top of your head?
I think that I think one thing, and maybe I touched on this a little bit, is I always tell people you need to fish with people that are better than you to get better and be open to it. And the example that I use is you might think you're the best fisherman in the world, and you might be right, but that doesn't mean that you can't learn from Joe or from me or from whoever else that you just happen to pass while you're walking down the beach. Somebody always knows something that you don't. Somebody always has a different perspective. Everybody has different experiences. So if you really want to get better, you should just sit back and listen and run it through your filter. Sometimes people will be talking and talking, talking. You're like, no,
Yeah.
I know that's wrong. I know for a fact that's wrong because my experience tells me it's wrong. That's fine. At least you've heard it and you can put it through your filter. But often what you'll find is the quiet guy that isn't talking to anybody is doing something and he's getting on the fish. And quite often they're the ones that are willing to, if you go over and you say, look, I'm not getting anything. What is it that you're doing? Or did you notice something I'm not doing that I need to do? And quite often they're willing to say, yeah, I didn't want to say anything because you didn't ask, but since you've asked, you need to slow down your retrieve,
Yeah.
which actually is what Wyatt did for me in North Carolina when I first met him.
Too
He
funny.
said, yeah, he said, you know what? You should be catching a lot of specks right now. And he must have had 10 by that time. I had none. And he said, I'm watching you. He's like, what I want you to do is lighten up the weight on the jig head. And I want you to go even slower than you're going. So I was going slow. He was going like glacier slow, and he was hooking them all up. And once that started, once I did that, I was catching the fish just as much as him. So fish with people that are better than you, be open to their feedback and implement it. See if it works for you.
Love it. Love it. All right. Well, pumped to have you on board. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I know you're going to be coming up with a ton of tips for our members and starting to do the weekly game plans as well for that area. Also going to be working on some of the smart spots and up in there. I mean, I know we've had a ton of requests, Maryland specifically. I don't know what happened, but we're listening to you, Maryland. We had a ton of new members from Maryland specifically. They're like, we want someone up here. So it's just perfect timing how all this worked out. And you even have a course. We're gonna, start showing that to some people as well. What is the course on?
It's called Mastering Inshore Flounder. I don't know if it'll stay the same title or not, but
Yeah.
it's really focused on catching flounder in the backwaters and near shore, primarily backwaters though. So anyone who's fishing in the backwaters on a boat or a kayak or even from land would benefit from that course.
Cool. Yeah, it's good. I saw it quite some time ago when you were first kind of working on it. You were sending us a couple
Right.
of videos saying, "What do you guys think?" I was like, "Man, this is fantastic." And it's the stuff you can't find out there on YouTube. I mean, really, really dissecting all these different types of spots, and then showing how to fish it. It's pretty valuable stuff. So we'll be talking about that here in the very near future. But yeah, stay tuned for Rich. One other thing is, I believe we might do it coming up like on one of these Monday nights. So what Rich was doing with his Fat Dad channel was doing a live what is it, just a live Q&A, usually with some type of guest, and that turned into a podcast on YouTube. And
Right.
that way, and we haven't really done a lot of live. I think it's only a couple. Shame on us. But we're going to test it out. We're going to have Rich come on and do a live show. Luke and I might join him and have some fun there on a Monday. Is it Monday at 8 is when you normally do them?
We normally do the Mondays at 8 o'clock, and we get some great guests, some big names, people like one that's coming up soon is Frank Mahalik, who is just a legendary blackfish fisherman. So also tautog, if you're not
Yeah.
aware, or tog,
Yeah.
for anyone that doesn't fish for them. But he designed the Century Pro Togger rod. He is just one of the people that just really knows what he's doing. He puts on a lot of seminars. He's been on. We've had a lot of big captains, Captain John Halkias, Captain Scotty Sevens, guys that are just really in tune with their local fisheries and love to come on and share information and answer questions. So that's the format. It's just, we like to bill it as just a few guys online talking fishing, and the people in the audience can chime in on chat. They have a lot of side conversations in chat, and ask questions. So it's a good time.
Cool.
We've had a lot of fun with it.
Well, stay tuned. That'll be on the Salt Strong YouTube channel. We'll bring Rich on and try to throw one in there. And I'm pumped because I don't think we've ever done one of these evening live shows. That'd be cool.
Yeah, they're fun. It's a little stressful, but it's fun.
Cool. And so all you have to do next is just stay tuned, especially if you're in those areas that we mentioned here. It's quite a few states that he'll kind of be covering to start off with. And if you have any questions, we put every one of these podcasts over at saltstrong.com in the fishing tips section. So it's saltstrong.com. You'll see a little thing at the top, fishing tips, and look for this blog post at the bottom. You can leave a question that'll come right to us. You can certainly leave it in YouTube, but the best place to make sure it'll like literally email me directly and I can get Rich involved too is to go to that blog post and ask your question there at the very bottom. That is the number one spot, guaranteed that it's going to get seen. So appreciate you guys big time. Appreciate the feedback. And that was a big reason all this happened. like I said, we've known Rich forever. We're kind of watching him continue to thrive as an angler, and we knew there was going to be a spot at some point, and the timing was just absolutely perfect. So we're pumped to have you on board as a Salt Strong fishing coach.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yes. All right, guys, we appreciate you. Love you. Talk to you on the next episode. We out. Peace.